Daisy, what ho, chaps and chaps, it's Game Chap and Bertie here.
Yes.
Yes, indeed, fellows, and I dare say we are now discussing Nintendo's rather quirky new title, Splatoon, coming soon to the market this year. And precisely, we are talking what is this game, where does its inspiration come from, and of course, how does it stack up against some of the other shooter games on the market today.
We most certainly are, yes indeed. Now Splatoon is gaining in popularity and interest, it would seem at first.
Yes.
Not received really with much interest, but now it seems that, as people have seen some of the things that have come out, some of the screenshots, etc., they're getting rather excited about the game, it would seem, and it's gaining in popularity, as I say.
Well, I think that's absolutely right, old chap. Yes, certainly, when it was first announced at E3, I believe, last year, there was a bit of sort of, shall we say, a few blank stares around the room, and perhaps people said, well, what's this? But now, of course, they've started to release more and more details about this shooting game, particularly in the Nintendo Direct we just saw, and people are starting to say, well, hey, this looks quite interesting, I say.
Most certainly they are, yes indeed. Now the game is due to come out, we think, around May 2015 this year.
Yes.
So not too long to wait for it.
That's right. Now, the basic overview of this game, then, Fiddles, is you've got a 4-on-4 team match-based setup, whereby, of course, you'll have teams of 4 players going head-to-head in order to win the shooting match. But, of course, what sets this apart from traditional shooting games, old chap?
Well, that's interesting, yes indeed. And just picking them up on what you said there, the 4x4, so we can have a maximum, it would seem, on the screen or in the game at any time of 8 players.
Yes.
Actually running around and doing their stuff. Now, what sets it apart? How is it different? What is this, a shooter? Well, you shoot, but you shoot paint.
Paint?
Rather than bullets. So is this a child-friendly one, as it were?
A kid-friendly one, perhaps.
A kid-friendly for the Nintendo, but there we shoot paint. But does that mean it's boring? Well, obviously not, because it's being picked up and with a lot of interest. It's gaining interest, as I say. So your objective here with your paint gun is to spray the arena that you're running around in the colour, whatever your colour is, and just cover it in that colour. So if your colour's blue, the idea is you've got to spray the whole arena and cover it in this blue colour against your opponent, who perhaps might be, for example, red, and he's got to, colour it red. So whoever does it first, and we presume you can overlap or overspray his paint colours.
That's right, you can, yes.
But, whoever does it first wins.
Well, of course, now indeed the objective then, Fiddles, is to cover the most territory in the arena in your own team colour, like blue, before the time's up. But of course, if the opponent covers it in more of their team colour, such as red, you'll actually lose then, you'll see. So the idea, of course, is to have domination over the territory by covering it in this graffiti or paint.
Yes, that's right. Now, there's other interesting elements to it as well. It looks like, I don't know if 100% sure, but it looks like the paint may be perhaps sticky, but we don't know to the players, because the actual players control creatures known as inklings.
Inklings?
Inklings, you see. And
so those inklings, these are these sort of kid things with the funny hats, aren't they?
Yes, most certainly. Now, these things, they're human shape and human sort of running around when they're going around spraying the map and trying to paint the map their colour, but they can apparently change automatically, instantly as it were, into sort of squids type thing, or squids that swim through the paint and can move over the map very quickly as a result.
I see. So basically you can turn into squid form to swim through ink that's your team colour, but of course not the other team colour. So therefore, the more paint you have down on the arena, the further you can swim, and therefore the more mobility you have over the map.
Most certainly, that's right. And also the Wii U's gamepad comes into play as well to help you to see the whole map.
That's right.
And apparently, you've got a teammate over there. You can
a teammate?
A teammate, yes. You can fast travel over to your teammate, which is handy, I suppose, if he's in trouble.
Yes, that's
handy.
handy.
A bit of paint help.
That's right. Now, the kills in this game are called splatters, and then when you splatter an enemy, you'll send them back to the spawn in standard shooting game fashion, but also you'll splat lots of ink onto the ground around where they got knocked out, you'll see. So that'll, of course, help your team out quite a lot by killing someone or splattering them.
Most certainly. So you need to brush up on your sort of team player skills there.
It's very much a team game, that's right.
Brush up.
Oh, yes, that was
Brush
good.
ups.
And also, it's not just multiplayer videos, it's also a single-player mode in the game as well, where you have to fight off various octopi or octopuses or something, I say.
Yes, indeed. So the whole idea of this running around painting things, before the other side can, seems to have gained a lot of interest. But the thing is this Nintendo's way or idea or challenge or replacement, whatever it is, for something like Call of Duty?
Ah, that's a very good question. But firstly, in Splatoon, of course, you get a primary weapon. That's your main gun, like a sniper rifle or the equivalent of a machine gun, a paint roller, etc. and so forth.
Ah, yes.
You get a secondary weapon, like an ink, a sprinkler. These sorts of things are secondary, a bit like your sidearm, I suppose.
Yes.
And also a special weapon, but you can only use your special when you've spread enough ink around and therefore charged it up, you'll see. And the specials are, of course, quite powerful.
Most certainly, so that's interesting. Primary, secondary, and a special. That's very with the charge-up ability, as you say.
That's
so
right.
That's going to obviously, if you need to discern when you're going to use your special gun and plan out and all things like that. Strategy, I suppose.
Yes, so for example, in another game, Battlefield 4, for example, you'd have a primary, like your machine gun, a secondary, your handgun, and maybe a special weapon or two, like some C4, or perhaps a mine, etc., and so forth. So Splatoon following a similar format there with 3 weapons in play at any given time.
Most certainly. Now, just another thing that's rather interesting there. There was apparently many different ideas for the characters, including macho men, Mario, robots, and animals. But they eventually decided to use these kid inklings, as they're called.
I see. So perhaps they were originally considering using Mario there at one point, old chap, and many other design ideas. But of course, they eventually settled on making this a brand new IP, which, if you ask me, makes sense because, of course, it's not really anything like Nintendo's done before. I mean, we had a sort of a shooting game mode in Metroid Prime 2, but that was a very long time ago, and Nintendo don't really do shooting games as a general rule. I mean, we had the Conduit on the Wii, but again, also quite a long time ago. So perhaps this is Nintendo's first real foray into the online shooting game genre, and that's quite interesting, I think.
It most certainly is, yes indeed. And of course, have they planned it to be kid-friendly, as we said?
Yes.
So when Mum and Dad come in the room and it's just spraying paint, this is much better than those sort of blowing their heads off and killing everyone.
And insulting people's mothers, old chap, and etc.
Well, most certainly.
Now also, it seems you can customize your hat, your outfit, and your boots in this game by going to various shops staffed by comical characters, and you can also buy different weapons depending on your experience level. So we have a sort of almost a Destiny-type RPG system, whereby as you gain more experience, you can unlock and therefore buy more powerful weapons with which to blast your foes.
Most certainly. That's an interesting, a good point that they've added there, and of course will be very, very popular. Everyone likes to upgrade and get a better weapon, etc., so forth. So
yes.
They've built that into the game, and I think they may have a winner with this one. But as we said earlier, though, are they trying to break in and say, look, this is our replacement for example, Battlefield and Call of Duty, etc.?
Exactly. Now you'll be interested to know, Fedios, that the team working on this game is actually somewhat younger than the staff who usually make Nintendo games. Apparently, one of the Animal Crossing staff was fiddling about with this 4-on-4 shooting game concept, and he presented it to some of the other staff at Nintendo, and they said, well, this idea looks great, let's try and make this into a game. And so that's how it started life. And also, the director and producer of Splatoon both said that they, along with the other team members, enjoy playing first-person shooters like Call of Duty and Battlefield. So maybe indeed that's a big part of the inspiration for this game.
Well, most certainly, yes indeed. I think they've been called on to produce something here, as we said, that will sort of challenge the other platforms that have these games, such as Battlefield, Call of Duty, etc.
Yes.
But of course, that's not really a very Nintendo thing to see blasts of blowing people's heads off, or whatever it might be, killing people, etc.,
yes.
with knives in different ways.
Grenades and guns.
Well, exactly. So they've come up with this idea,
yes.
much more kid-friendly and sort of home-friendly, family-friendly.
I think that's the word, yes. And I think basically what we're looking at here is indeed Nintendo's kid-friendly version of the Call of Duty or Battlefield formula. Although actually, if you ask me, the overall graphical style is probably a bit closer to TF2 than the other games, old chap.
Well, I think so, yes. There's a lot of TF2, I think, feel about it, most certainly. But when we look at the two games and we think, well, we've got Battlefield and Call of Duty out there with their different modes, deathmatch, different things, capture the flags, etc. things.
Domination, conquest, that's right.
Exactly, going on where you're basically part of a team, where you're running about and working with your team to try to complete these objectives, etc. Of course, it's very similar to what we've got over in Splatoon, where you are still part of a team.
Yes.
Although a smaller team than what you could have on some of those games. And then you're still going around, running around, completing these objectives, and
right.
of course also holding weapons, as it were.
Well, of course. Now, as you said, some of these shooting games, particularly Battlefield, of course, feature, shall we say, conquest or domination modes, whereby the objective is to get hold of a control point, a bit like TF2, and to basically capture that control point and hold it for as long as you can. And of course, the more control points you own, the more you'll drain the other team's tickets, as it were, which is like their soldiers' lives. So in other words, if you're in control of the most control points, you basically have an advantage and you're likely to win the match. Now that's how Battlefield and Call of Duty do it. Of course, Battlefield is very much large scale. You can have up to 64 players in one match,
yes.
Whereas Splatoon here only supports 8. So it's a much, shall we say, smaller and more intimate type of match, which is perhaps a bit better suited to the Wii U's hardware. Certainly, it's not quite on that grand scale, but we do nonetheless have here the workings of an online multiplayer shooter in some form, which, although a bit different from the others, is nonetheless a first for Nintendo.
Yes, most certainly. Now, we don't know, or do we know, how large these arenas will be? Because, of course, some of Call of Duty and Battlefield maps, I mean, size-wise, are they large?
They're quite large, yes.
They are quite large, aren't they, some of them? Yes, indeed. We don't know, I don't think we do know the sort of size these arenas will be at the moment, do we?
I don't think they're going to be super huge, old chap. I mean, we have had a look at a couple of the overall map overviews for the arenas, and they don't seem to be quite on the scale of Battlefield 4. For example, I don't know, the Zavod 311 map in that particular game is very large and sprawling. But if you had only 8 players on that scale of map, I think it would be hard to find out where the blazes everyone was held by. You'd be constantly searching for the opponent, I think.
Yes, indeed, that's a jolly good point. And of course, we also don't know whether the landscape there will be interactive in any way. A bit like it is in Battlefield, the things blow up. I don't know whether it does it in Call of Duty modes.
Not so much Call of Duty, but yes, Battlefield does have deformable terrain. I don't think Splatoon's terrain is deformable, because after all, you're not actually using explosive weapons, but I do think you can go into squid form and do things like go through grates and tunnels, etc. and whatnot, to get an edge on your opponents.
Yes, indeed, yes, you may well be able
That's as you're swimming through the ink, you see.
Yes, indeed, yes, as you go through the ink, etc., so forth.
But of course, there is a bit of a difference here between Splatoon and games like Call of Duty. For example, in Call of Duty, you might have a 6-on-6 deathmatch. That means you're just going in there, shooting each other, and basically getting the most points, with no focus at all on capturing things. Splatoon is not like that. It's not just like shooting the enemy. You have to, of course, dominate the most part of the arena by using your ink to cover the terrain in your own team colour. So, very much, it is a tactical shooter. It's not just about scoring points by splattering your foes. You'll actually have to control the most part of the map, and that will of course mean it's very much a team-based thing.
Most certainly it is team-based, and something that you just outlined there, perhaps without realising it, of course, is because in the Call of Duties, etc., it is a shooter, but you're shooting someone else, whereas in this game it would seem you're actually not shooting the other player, as it were, you're shooting the terrain.
That's a very good point, Oldboy. You're not so much directing bullets in the opponent's direction, but as you say, you are sort of still shooting them. You can still splatter your opponents, but
yes.
Your main objective is not to shoot them, is to shoot the ground.
Most certainly. Now, I wonder if shooting or splattering the opponents there in Splatoon has any effect on them, whether it slows them down, upsets them somehow, whatever.
Well, I think, as we said earlier, Oldboy, it sends them back to the spawn point if you'll splatter them. That is, of course, like a kill. And also, it splats a lot of your own team colour ink onto the ground, so that's a bonus. But, of course, you do have a distinction here between Splatoon and those other types of games, because you're not shooting enemies per se. You're going around trying to dominate the battlefield by colouring it in the most ink possible. And I do think that's where we draw the distinction between Splatoon and your typical shooting games.
Yes, indeed, I absolutely agree with that, and I think that's an interesting element to it, as well as, of course, as you say, when you're splattering enemies, you're sending them back, as it were, to the spawn point, or like a kill, so therefore there's going to be quite a lot of strategy to running around and doing this game. It's not just going around just spraying paint.
No.
You're going to have to think, you see, because you can knock players out or put them back to the spawn point, slow them down. There's quite a lot of strategy involved in it, and I think it could be a game that could be quite, very popular with Nintendo fans.
I think so, and of course we said earlier that perhaps it's not on the same scale as other games, like it's not exactly 64-player multiplayer battles, but of course, despite the fact that you don't have the same scale there, I think people will go to play Splatoon just to play Splatoon. They're not necessarily going there to get a huge scale battle. They're going there to enjoy this new and quirky idea, which to be fair is almost over into its own category of genre, because there's not really anything else like it on the market, you know.
No, there isn't. No, they've come up with a very good idea there. We all know about paintball, of course, but bringing this one into the way they've done it, and rather than shooting other people with paintballs, etc., you're actually shooting the terrain, is a clever idea, I think.
I think so. Well, certainly it's some innovation from Nintendo there, but of course the big question is how well will it sell, and that remains to be seen, you know.
Yes, I think they'll certainly be saying, look, this is our Call of Duty replacement. It's going to be good, go out and play it, and I think a lot of people are going to do that.
I think certainly there will be a lot of curious interest from players of shooting games who are saying, how does this compare? Is it the sort of the same shooting genre? Oh, this looks a bit different, I'll give this a try, etc. and so forth. And indeed just from Nintendo fans who may have seen it advertised in the Nintendo Direct or on the TV, etc. and so forth, and just think it's worth a go.
Most certainly. Just one thing I just thought of there, of course, multiplayer is extremely important for this, online as well. Nintendo will have to make sure that they've got their act together with their servers, because we've seen some lag in other games such as Mario Kart and Smash Brothers, so we wouldn't want to see that here, I don't think.
Well, indeed. I mean, lag perhaps not too much of an issue with this type of game, because as I said earlier, it's not so much about splatting the enemy as it is about splatting the ground, but
yes.
Certainly, indeed, I do think they have the server infrastructure in place now, and, perhaps a tad laggy, but I'm sure it'll do the job here.
Well, most certainly. So what do you think out there, you chaps and chapettes, about this game? There seems to be quite a lot of interest interested in? Are you interested? Is it something that you'll play?
Yes, indeed, Fails. What do you think, I say? Are you excited? Could you not care less about it? Let us know, I say.
Most certainly do that, and also while you're doing it, just pop along and see our other channel as well, where the Chaps play. We're also doing a walkthrough at the moment of Captain Toad, believe it or not.
Fun little game that I say. Well, worth a look, you know. Well, there you are, Fails. This has been the Chaps, I say, not the Chaps play. It's Game Chat and Birdie, you know. This charming Splatoon, I say, the rather quirky new shooter on Nintendo. Thank you, Private Johnny, as I say. I'm looking forward to seeing you once more the next exciting out of my word. Until then.